Let's begin this November update of a year in our garden by taking a little stroll in the orchard and having a look at the trees and seeing what's happening down here, how things are going. This Packham pear tree behind me I think is the happiest I've ever seen it. It's got lots and lots of young pears on it this year and they're all looking really good. Of course, being a Packham, it's still quite a long way off before we actually will get anything off it, but it's really promising at this stage and we hope it continues to go just as well. The apples have set fairly well and there looks to be quite a good crop coming along and they're generally looking quite happy. There's a small amount of downy mildew around and that's quite common this time of the year, I find, with the young growth on the apples. I generally don't do anything about it because it is such a small factor. The apricots are also looking for quite good this year. It's really hard to see exactly how many are on when you've got green apricots on a tree with green leaves and they hide amongst the leaves. But I think it's going to be the best year we've had so far for apricots. You'll notice that the grass is getting quite long here in the orchard because I haven't actually spent the time to come here and mow at all. It doesn't matter that much so long as I come back here and cut it before there's a lot of seed, which will have to be quite soon because the flowers are beginning to come. You don't want huge quantities of seed spread around the area and they'll only create a big weed problem if you don't keep it under control. Behind me is one of our cherry trees and the cherries are the first fruit that we will harvest in the season out of this orchard. They will come probably within 3 to 4 weeks, so towards the end of December, and there's already not quite colour yet but just a little bit of yellowing happening, so it's not far off. And the fact that they will ripen early means that I need to get in and actually get these netted before the fruit ripens or they will disappear very quickly and the birds will help themselves and we won't get a crop. But that's something I'll do in another video. There is a little bit of a problem with these cherries and that's something I need to address today. There is quite a lot of aphid, well I believe it to be aphid attack on the tips. And because they're nice, soft and young and juicy, they're quite attractive. So all the tips on both of the trees are being affected by this. Now, I could use a spray or organic sprays even and get rid of them that way. But it's really difficult with the curl of the leaves to actually ensure you've got penetration. So I'm going to use a simpler method and I hope it's going to work. What I'm going to do is to simply cut those tips off and put them into a bag. That way I can put it in the sun will take care of the problem, and the fact that I'm cutting these tips really won't hurt that much because, as I said, I do have to net the trees, so stopping the growth at this point actually works well from that point of view, because you don't really want it coming out through your nets. Probably in another 6 to 8 weeks the nets will come off and then any growth won't matter. And the fact that it makes them a little bit more dense will probably be a good thing. So with those in the bag, I may not have gotten rid of every aphid, but I think I've probably gotten rid of more than if I sprayed. So let's go over to the eastern side and see what's happening in the veggie garden. As we come by the flower garden, you'll notice that the flowers have changed. The wisteria has now begun to fade away and heaps and heaps of new flowers are bursting with colour. The roses are beginning to come out and look really nice and delight us. Look, I know that there are many people that watch my videos who probably have the attitude that They're only interested in growing food, growing vegetables. But I really encourage you, even in the smallest space, to try and grow some flowers, because we're not just walking stomachs. We do have minds, and we need to feast our eyes on the beauty of the flowers and the bright colours, and I'm convinced that doing that makes us happier. Okay, let's head on to the veggies. I haven't done a lot of work here in the raised beds and this section of the garden, apart from the fact that I have netted, as you see, the cabbages and also the broccoli have both gone under nets. I haven't seen any white cabbage butterfly flying yet, but it pays to get the nets on before they come around, because if you see them, you're probably already too late. The snow peas have really been growing really well, and I see there's some there already, just a few that are ready to pick, and from now on we'll be harvesting plenty of snow peas. The zucchinis are full on flowering, and they're not far away from having some fruit that's able to pick. So it'll only be a week or two and we'll have zucchinis there. I did plant some climbing beans. I haven't seen any come through yet, but I expect them within a few days. You will notice, of course, that the broad beans have really grown incredibly, and I think they're almost as tall as I am there in the middle. In terms of crop, they are developing very quickly, and it won't be long and we'll start picking. Given that I planted them in spring, they're actually setting beans right from the very base, from the first flowers, and so there should be a pretty good crop on here. What I didn't do was actually pick the tops back to stop the growth, and look, I generally don't bother with doing that, but you can. I mean, it's an option. You can pick these tops off and of course eat them. They're quite edible, but if you do that earlier, you will get more branching and thickness. I'm going to have plenty of beans here. I have no concern about having enough, so that's one of the reasons I haven't bothered to spend the time doing that. The garlic is looking a bit of a wilderness. I haven't come in here and weeded because I'm very close to harvest. This, which is proper garlic, a purple garlic, and it is ready to be harvested right now. I will do it before the day has passed. I'll get this out of the ground. To the back there is the elephant garlic, and I will leave that for probably another 4 weeks before I harvest it. It takes a little bit longer. These tops, look, you can break them off, and the claim by many people is that breaking them off puts more energy back into the bulb. I haven't really established that to be the case, but if you've got the time to walk around and break them off, it doesn't hurt to do that. Now, I thought you might like a little update on these avocado trees. I'm happy to say that there is new growth on them, new leaves coming out as I had hoped for, and they look like they will come back into leaf and start to grow now that the weather is beginning to warm. The chickpeas are growing quite nicely, as you can see. They're really developing. But people have asked about the peanuts. Have any of those come up? Well, at this point, no, nothing has shown its face. It's making me doubtful as to whether anything's going to come through at all. I think they are a bit slower than the chickpeas, but yeah, I'm fairly doubtful, but I'll still give them a little bit more time and we'll see what happens. The potatoes that I planted a month ago have come up nicely. I've been through them once and given them a little bit of a hill and some weeding around just to control the initial growth. Now they're probably due for another go, and also I'll need to go through and clean out some of these weeds that are in the row, which hilling them up doesn't always control. So it's generally one pass through for that. Give it a hill. Usually I find hilling them with the wheel hoe, I do it about 3 times, and by that stage I've achieved coverage and general suppression of weed growth. So they're getting underway well. Up the back here you'll see the earlier crop. It is starting to yellow a little bit, which shows it's almost ready to harvest. I'll probably wait another week or 2 before I harvest them, just to make sure they're fully mature, but I probably could dig some now if I wanted to. Here in the greenhouse, the capsicums are looking really great. They're happy and growing really well. The eggplant, however, don't look so happy. They are still growing and moving along. I usually find them a lot harder to satisfy, and they just really don't do that well in my situation. I've tried them outdoors and I find them do better inside, but not really happy anywhere. Get some crop, but not as good as you can in some other places. The straw bale tomatoes are going along nicely and beginning to show some flowers now. You will see that I have planted some basil amongst them. The basil helps reduce the amount of whitefly that troubles them. So I'll need to come in here and put some stakes around and create some climbing frame for them very shortly. We still have a secondary crop of broccoli here to pick. You'll see I need to come back and do that today, is to pick this broccoli. There's a fair bit there. Look, we might get another one still. It all depends on how soon the white butterfly turn up. Now, some of you may have seen the video where I planted the pumpkins. Well, I'm happy to say that the majority of the pumpkin seeds have now come up. It hasn't taken too long. They're doing really well. There's only been, really, that I can see, maybe 2 or 3 seeds that haven't actually germinated yet, and they might still come. Some are only just emerging today, so it's really early at this stage, but looking good. Now, I planted some sweet corn in this section behind the tomatoes. Germination has been a little bit patchy. Part of it is the factor, I think, that I planted at the end of October, and in early, well, basically the beginning of November, the weather went from what was a warm October to a very cool and windy November. So rather than having ground heat to actually germinate them and get them up quickly, it was cool, and corn really likes it hot. So look, there's sufficient germination, enough to give us a reasonable crop here. There was quite a bit of weed. I've been over it early this morning and knocked out a lot of that weed and just letting it solarize with the nice sunny day we're having. I'll come back probably at the end of the day and re-hill these so they'll look a lot tidier before the day's over. Like the corn, the tomatoes really suffered when I first put them out because the weather turned and it got cooler, as I said. So for the first 2 to 3 weeks of November, they looked pretty sad. They were, suffering that shock of the temperature change and the cooler nights. But in the last week, they've really started to jump away. There's new growth and they're looking green and healthy. Now you'll notice I put a layer of compost on, but I've still got weed around. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come back with some newspaper over this weed and put straw over it, the same as I've done on the pumpkins. And that way I'll get good weed control and it'll be much less work over the season and a lot easier when it comes to harvesting the tomatoes. What are you looking for, Samuel?
I think strawberries.
Strawberries.
I want to show the camera one. And this is what a strawberry would look like.
Of course, I know what a strawberry looks like. And that's the best news of the season, is that the strawberries are beginning to ripen.
Yeah.
We haven't had very many yet, But
look at these strawberries.
yes,
There's big
very
ones.
soon.
There's big ones and little ones. Different types of sizes. And
Very
the green
soon we'll have
ones
lots.
aren't ready.
So that's the roundup for the month. That's what's been happening in our garden in November. And we'll come back to at the end of December and show you what's happened in the next month.